We've seen some catastrophic wildfires that really propagated through various service territories for various utilities. Integrated planning is definitely a process that we hope is one that can help us prioritize. That artificial intelligence is really energy thirsty. The evolution of energy consumption has changed radically in the last 20 years, more so than within the last 50 years. The data centers that really drive the AI that we utilize on a day-to-day basis.
Strengthening the grid in that part of the world was related to mitigating the chance that a bushfire would start.
Thank you, everyone, for hitting play. I'm Kinsey Grant Baker, and you're listening to Power Perspectives. Demand for electricity is growing faster than at any time in recent memory. From AI and data centers to EVs and electrification, utilities are under pressure to modernize planning processes, break down silos, and invest strategically, all while keeping affordability front and center. That's a pretty long to-do list, and it makes me wonder, how does managing all of that really work? Well, integrated planning. It's what's powering utilities through this unprecedented moment in time. So today on Power Perspectives, we'll hear from two experts who can tell us not only how integrated planning works in theory, but how it changes the game in practice too. And before we dive in, a shout out to IFS Copperleaf for making today's episode possible. Stick around to hear more about IFS Copperleaf and the impressive work that they are doing. Now, today's guests are here to unpack what integrated planning really means, why it matters now, and how collaboration across the industry can help us put the pedal to the metal. So I'm thrilled to welcome our guests today, Marc Lamoureux, Principal Product Manager at IFS Copperleaf, and Wen Tu, Senior Director of Integrated Grid Planning at PG&E. Marc, Wen, welcome to Power Perspectives. How are you today?
Hey, Kinsey. Thanks for the invite. Really appreciate it. And looking forward, Marc, as always, to talking to you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Happy to be here.
I'm excited for this conversation. I think we're going to have, a really good time talking about what integrated planning is and why it matters, as I mentioned. But I would love to start with just getting a little bit of background on the two of you. So could you give me just a quick rundown on what your jobs entail? What is your day-to-day like, and what are the biggest priorities for you and your teams right now? Marc, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Happy to jump right in. So as a principal product manager at IFS Copperleaf, my day-to-day involves working with customers and clients and partners and everybody from the industry to figure out how we address the growing trends and the top priorities problems, and come up with innovative solutions to drive the industry forward and try to actually figure out exactly how the software we build can work for the customers that we have. And so we're figuring out where to invest. We're partnering with customers and other solution implementation type consultants and partners in that sense to get to a stage where we can bring something to market that drives the value that we expect from it. Day to day can vary quite a bit, from flying in to do podcasts like this to just working with our development teams and designers to try to make a product that works for everybody that needs it to drive value for them.
Awesome. And Wen, what about you?
Yeah, my team and I were very focused in the last year on creating and deploying a new investment planning process for electric operations within PG&E. And that process is called integrated grid planning. It's a process that we're going to utilize to figure out how to invest $5 billion a year for the next 10 years into the electric system. And day to day, what that means is we're constantly, in Visios trying to build out very detailed processes, working with various stakeholders within electric operations to determine whether they can do the work we're asking them to do in a different way, what that entails, working with our technical solution partners like IFS Copperleaf to build the technology that enables the process. So that next year we can develop a $5 billion portfolio of work that really addresses the customer needs and allows us to be able to do it in a organized, cohesive fashion.
Yeah, the spending $5 billion a year for the next decade is certainly a tall order. And I imagine we'll talk a good deal today about capital deployment and how planning and planning efficiently can impact it. But before we get into that and some of the other big questions that I have for the two of you today, I want to speak a little bit about just kind of the state of play, what utilities are dealing with in terms of challenges. And I rattled some of them off at the beginning in the introduction to this episode, but I would love to hear your perspectives on what forces from, AI and data centers, renewables, electrification, affordability, regulatory pressures, all of that. What of those forces are colliding to create today's if you will, grid moment. Can you just give me your snapshot of how you see the reality of working on the grid today?
Yeah, it's a great question. For the utility industry, it is really an unprecedented time since the Industrial Revolution. I think the evolution of energy consumption has changed radically in the last 20 years, more so than my lifetime, and I think within the last 50 years. And it's really sparked by a couple of different things. One is electrification, right? Whether that means solar panels on people's houses, whether that means people buying more electric vehicles, whether that means converting both commercial, industrial, and residential appliances to be electrically driven. All those things combine to create a more demand for electricity and demand that the utilities have to serve. And so in a sense, I mean, it's a huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity for the industry to be able to seize that opportunity and really deliver for our customers. But at the same time, it's a huge challenge. What it means is that the utilities are having to build way more electric infrastructure, way faster than any other time since we initially created the grid, and all doing it safely and affordably for our customers. It's a big challenge as well. And just recently, we've had a new technology that's really risen within within the United States, which is artificial intelligence. That artificial intelligence is really energy thirsty, and all the AI data centers, the data centers that really drive the AI that we utilize on a day-to-day basis, consumes a huge amount of electricity, and that demand, that new demand, is also one that needs to be serviced by our grid as well. And so we're needing to invest more and more to the grid to be able to supply all the demands of the various customers that we have. And so that's created a tremendous opportunity and also a tremendous challenge.
In addition to electrification, which is something we talk about a lot on this show, I imagine there are other challenges that have emerged. Can you walk me through what some of those might look like?
Yeah, great question, Kinsey. Two other challenges that have arisen as well in the last 20 years. One is wildfire risk. 20 years ago, the utilities, the electric industry didn't really talk about wildfire risk that much. I mean, we always did vegetation management to make sure that tree branches don't fall on our circuits, causing outages. But beyond that, we didn't really discuss wildfire risk as this tremendous crisis, right? For the industry. But in the last 10 years, we've seen some catastrophic wildfires that really propagated through various service territories for various utilities, PG&E included, and also the ones, for example, in Maui, Hawaii as well. And it's really made the industry and our regulators realize that we really need to manage that risk as well, right? And so needing to spend and invest in our infrastructure to making sure that it's resilient to both wildfires and also safe in terms of operating conditions that are really dry and not causing wildfires ourselves is a challenge. The second one is closely related, which is, but there are a lot more 100-year wind events, once in a lifetime storms that sweep through our service territories as well. And these catastrophic weather events really puts a stress on our grid and really has increased the need for us to be able to strengthen the grid and have a grid that's more resilient to those types of weather events. So those are two other factors that's really impacted the way that we think about how we invest in our grid and how we make sure that our grid is resilient to provide resilient and reliable energy.
Yeah, and it gets also towards the execution side of things as well, because you can make the best plan in the world, and then you have one of these 100-year events that comes through and completely uses up the entirety of your resource budget for any given sector of the state or in service territory, that then you're like, okay, well then how do I even get the rest of my capital plan done?
Right.
And so there's all these different things that are connected, and we're seeing on our side a lot of requests for resilience models or for wildfire related or vegetation related management related models, and how to factor this in and justify investing in something that, to your point, 20 years ago, nobody's really thinking about having tree trimming being part of their capital plan or capital works. And so there's things like that have become front and center and way more common in the work that we've been doing. And I think it was like 10 years ago, I first got my first instance of exposure to bushfires in Australia, where similar issue where every so often they would just get absolutely decimated by a large fire. And a lot of what they were doing from a resilience standpoint or strengthening the grid in that part of the world was related to mitigating the chance that a bushfire would start. And now we're seeing that all over North America and other places as well. So it's becoming more and more of a trend for utilities in that sense.
Yeah, and there's so much different system needs, right? And the question that we have as the utilities is, and this goes all the way up to our senior leadership team, is how do we prioritize? How do we prioritize how much we invest in wildfire risk mitigation versus making sure that our system is top notch in terms of reliability? How do we ensure that we both address the new demands that are coming from electrification while also making the system resilient to weathers? Yeah. There's a lot of priorities that we need to sort through, and integrated planning is definitely a process that we hope is one that can help us prioritize.
Yeah, it's definitely something we need to work on defining for various aspects of the industry. We found that the word integrated is almost a catch-all, and in certain cases where you put integrated in front of a lot of concepts, and really what it boils down to is trying to break down a silo between different parts of your strategic or operational decision making or planning, whether you're talking about demand, forecasting demand for energy, and that's a huge part of the electrification trend as well, where suddenly you're increasing demand. Okay, well, where's the generation going to come from? Okay, well, let's start thinking about DERs. And it's all kind of connected, and it's breaking down those silos across the business where they exist, and whether it's between strategy and where you're doing field level execution, or it's between the dual fuel aspect that all of the utilities have, where you've got a gas side of the business and electric side of the business. It can exist in various forms. And so the solution needs to be flexible. It needs to accommodate for the different gaps we have, but also be this cohesive layer to enable the end-to-end process.
That's right.
Yeah. You guys are great. You're like doing my job for me. This is wonderful. I think we're hitting on a lot of the really big meaty topics that are driving conversations in our industry right now. We talked a little bit when you mentioned, electrification, wildfire risk, extreme weather, some of these big pain points that are directly, I don't know, correlation versus causation. They're correlated to, if not, causing some of the other issues that are sort of the second and third order challenges that utilities are facing. Aging infrastructure, regulatory pressure, capital constraints, some of these big problems where we know we need to solve for demand, extreme weather, wildfires, but figuring out how to do that is the challenge, because you have all of these other disparate parts that need to work together, that need to be orchestrated together to solve some of these challenges. And this is, I imagine, really where integrated planning plays a significant role in figuring out the future of what utility strategy looks like. There are a few key areas that you two touched on that I would love to get a little bit more perspective on. But before we do that, Marc, just from your vantage point, you gave a great sort of primer on what integrated planning is. Can you tell me just briefly how IFS Copperleaf works with utilities to make integrated planning happen, and maybe why people are so much more interested in talking about integrated planning today than they had been in years past?
I think first and foremost, the why is the efficiency question. We're all looking to drive a huge amount of efficiency, or else we see the need to drive a huge amount of efficiency through the entirety of the end-to-end system, where you define your strategic objectives and the goals that you have for your organization and what you need to accomplish over both the short, medium, and long term. And then you have to follow that through and chase it through a planning system onto handing off that plan to somebody that's actually going to go, or a team of individuals that are actually going to go ahead and do that work. And there's a lot of minutia between those handoffs. There's a lot of governance around how that needs to happen. There's a lot of consistency you need to inject into the system and support, both from the standpoint of you have an ecosystem of other pieces of software that you already use as data sources, and that you need to be able to then combine into a single decision-making platform. And that's really where we come in, and we end up helping our customers and partners is on creating that type of cohesive platform where you can do both the strategic and all the way through to the execution piece of it, and at least trying to create pieces and aspects of a plan that can be executed. And so there's two main areas where that happens. Is the transition from the asset needs aggregation through to the investment creation, where you're actually defining what's going to be possible as far as interventions, whether you're figuring out the eligibility criteria or you're defining the different alternatives to address the needs that you have. And then the second phase of that is translating that into an optimized plan or some for the first draft of that plan and taking some of the guesswork out and the manual bias out of crafting that initial plan. And so if I could pinpoint two areas that we get involved with the most, it's the definition of how to do that valuation, or at least 3 points, sorry. the definition of that framework initially, as to how to do the valuation and how to do that consistently. Then there's the handoff from the asset needs and the system needs over to the interventions and investments that you could make. And then the third piece is getting that towards an optimized plan out the other end and making sure that plan is executable.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I think from you, Wen, we'll get some specifics on what this looks like in practice as well. And I want to get into that in just a second. But, before we do that, I have a bit of a follow up on the comments on, silos and the reduction of silos. That's a big topic on the minds of many of our listeners, resource planning here, distribution planning there, investment planning somewhere else. I understand the need for silos and that integrated planning can help break down some of those silos within an organization and create better collaboration. But beyond just that collaboration, it's not just team to team. It can be utility to utility, grid to grid, different, entity A to entity 37, right? So what does industry-wide alignment on, definitions and best practices, why is that important? And what can that kind of collaboration look like? And then if I can kind of wedge one more question in there, how does integrated planning make that sort of macro collaboration possible?
We've spent quite a bit of time the last couple of years speaking with other utilities, either through conferences or through benchmarking. And we've talked about and shared the problem that PG&E has in terms of trying to figure out a framework to be able to prioritize our work, right? We have so many system needs and so many competing priorities. How does our organization think about how we prioritize our work, and how does other utilities think about the same thing? And what we found out is that 90% of the utilities we've talking to, they are working on the same thing. They have the same problem, and they're working on some aspects of integrated grid planning, integrated resource planning as well.
Intelligent planning, put in any I word in front of a planning word or something like that, and you have somebody who's identified a part of that larger scheme that they need to address. And I think that's been the biggest commonality. And I think us putting out integrated planning into the ether of the industry has really pulled people from the woodwork and come out of the woodwork to talk about these different things. And I don't necessarily know, I think your question was, or the second part of it was, how has integrated planning helped with that? Well, it is helping with certain aspects of it. And I think it's more that it's facilitated the conversation or the start of trying to pull people together from Australia, Europe, North America to these different sessions and have the conversation about what a consistent approach or process for this across the industry looks like.
Yeah. And a consistent approach really starts with what we realize when we talk to the other utilities is that everybody is working on their own framework, right? How do we value wildfire work? How do we value reliability work? How do we value capacity and load growth work? And every single utility was doing something a little bit different and all along the same veins, all trying to solve the same problems. And we realized that if there's industry collaboration, and if there's industry consensus on a value framework, maybe not the value models, but just the framework to start, then we can accelerate the industry's deployment in integrated planning and help accelerate the prioritized decision making across the entire industry for all the utilities all at once. And I think that would bring tremendous value to the industry. What do you think?
Oh yeah, and I think it's this massive acceleration of learning as well, where you get more people working on it, more people iterating, more people trying to make it work. Whereas if you're just in your own silo, to overuse that word, it's going to take you a lot longer to get to a point where you've got something that works practically. Whereas if you can learn and people can try different aspects of it, because you'll be coming at it and are coming at it from slightly different angles with different regional needs, or you're reporting to a different commission, and so the communication style is a bit different, or the requirements are worded differently. And so you get different takes on it. And I think that'll accelerate our getting to the end goal of having that more consensus approach to how to actually go about thinking through it.
Yeah. What was also interesting in all these discussions, attending all these conferences and talking to all the utilities, is that we realized that all of the state commissions that regulates the utilities in the different states and across the world, they're thinking about integrated grid planning as well. Because what they want is the exact same thing that we want, is for the utilities to spend all of our customers' dollars as efficiently as possible. And so they were also talking to academic labs and other thought leaders to try to figure out what they should prescribe for the utilities to do from an integrated grid planning standpoint as well. And so when we talk about an industry consensus, not only does it benefit the utilities in helping us accelerate, but we also have a common framework and a guidance document that would allow the regulators to stay consistent as well, and to get that to get that alignment between the regulators and the utilities, and thinking about a common framework and a common language and a common approach, right? And so that all the utilities aren't doing something different, or the risk of a public utilities commission prescribing something that may not be practical for the utilities to even implement.
I've always thought about this in the back of my head, where we started with the word integrated and obviously integrated grid planning, integrated planning. And I always laughed about the possibility that at the end of the day, once we've got the unified approach, that there may be a better name for it. And then we'd end up changing the name after like months or even years of thinking about it. It hasn't escaped me that that's potentially possible, just to get a differentiated sort of scheme around it. But that would be funny.
What would you change the name to?
I don't know yet, but it just occurred to me that because, and I think it was really, it hit home when we were at the best practices symposium a couple months back, where I think almost every other presentation, or almost 80% of the presentations, had the word integrated in it at some point to describe it. And so that was the first time where it landed on me that, oh, maybe the name to differentiate a bit more, actually describe what we're doing in more detail, but without it being a complete mouthful might be appropriate. But anything's possible.
I think there's a couple of common themes when people talk about integrated planning. There's the engineering planning that folks are trying to integrate between generation, transmission, and distribution. How do we integrate the planning across those three systems to make sure that the outcomes for our customers are the best? That to make sure that when we build generation, when we build transmission, and we connect it all to distribution, that the outcome for the end user is exactly what we wanted. And so there's that integrated system planning and engineering planning, right? Which is different from what we've been talking about, which is how, once all the system needs are identified, how do we integrate the decision making from an investment planning standpoint? Yeah, I think that's where our focus has been. And how do we optimize for the work plan and the dollars that we spend to ensure there's 2 firsts and 3 firsts for every dollar from an outcome standpoint. And that's also differentiated from what we heard as well, which is integrated resource planning. Once we have an investment plan and once we have a work plan, how do we integrate the crews that are needed in different locations, the materials that are needed, the true execution planning that happens downstream of the work plan and investment plan? Yeah. So I think when people talk about integrated planning, it could be all 3 aspects, or it could be one of the 3. Yeah. And for us, I've been thinking, maybe we should talk about integrated investment planning.
Yeah. Integrated capital planning, integrated investment planning. Exactly. Yeah. This focuses the definition.
That's right.
And maybe integrated planning is the whole, could be all 3. And then you have the resource planning, the investment planning, and then sort of the engineering planning that you're talking about. And that shows you how broad the topic is. And I think also partially why it explains a bit of why so many folks are interested in having the conversation to try to figure out, well, which part of the problem am I focused on, or is the biggest priority for my business? And sometimes they're very aware of a small segment of it, but then when they start talking to other utilities, other players in the industry about it, they see, this is a very similar problem, but a slightly different application. And so thematically, it's very, very similar, but practically speaking, it's going to have some differences and require maybe a different tool set or a slightly different approach for it.
I think a lot of this conversation to me brings to mind the idea that consensus can exist in many different ways and shapes and forms. We have talked about consensus across the entire electric utility industry. We have talked about consensus within an organization. One is a value framework. One is more of are we communicating who's on first? I'm curious about how all of this can potentially factor into what we would perceive as utility agility. Not to like be a poet and I didn't know it, but when we think about what meeting the moment looks like, of what solving these challenges that we've been talking about today looks like, from electrification to extreme weather, a lot of that comes down to maintaining an ability to stay nimble and to stay agile. So how might integrated planning, however we want to define it, at any level, right? How might that, as like a larger framework for operating a utility, how might that impact agility in the future?
I think part of it is in the approach that we've taken to solutioning for it. We've taken a very iterative approach to trying to define and breaking it up into what's needed at the start of the process, going through to the end of it. And I think the pattern that we've seen is that it starts with the needs aggregation. And you can go about it a whole bunch of different ways. And I think the flexibility in how that happens, whether it's on a system like Copperleaf, whether it's in a different third-party tool, it doesn't, like, that part doesn't necessarily matter. It's more that it gets done. And I think having that flexibility and having an iterative approach to the solutioning as you move down the different parts of that process is definitely one of the keys that you can apply. I think historically, I don't know if anybody would have described the utility industry as agile or particularly like flexible or fast moving. But I think because we're using a lot of digital tools to try to break down the silos, we can take a more iterative approach in the planning process. And because it's not as tightly linked to the operational side, you can take a more iterative approach to trying to solve some of these issues, test things out, and maybe have a more flexible approach that's can allow for incremental results and not just try to do the whole thing in one go.
Yeah, Mark, your answer there really got me thinking. You're right. I think asking for a utility to be agile is like asking for the sky to be red. Right? It just it doesn't happen. Maybe on one of the smokier days here in California, and that's the reason that the utility may not be traditionally very agile. It's on purpose. It's deliberate. It's because we provide a very foundational service, and some people actually call it a right? And but it's a very foundational service of providing energy for day-to-day life, for all of our customers, to all the citizens within the state that we serve. And we can't change that. We can't change that very quickly on our customers, right? So they demand that service, they demand consistency, and they demand reliability. And so we are very deliberate and very intentional in the decisions that we make and the things that we do change. And we're very thoughtful and careful about changing things that may impact the outcomes for our customers. Mm-hmm. However, there is a framework by which the utilities do become agile, and we do start to rise to the occasion in terms of meeting today's demand. And that's through processes that allow us to be agile. And I really believe that integrated grid planning, integrated investment planning, the framework that we are developing with our partners at Copperleaf allows us to be agile. And I think about it as if there is a different thinking in terms of prioritization between wildfire investments, reliability investments, and capacity investments, we can change that every single year by changing our value models, right? And that actually allows us to have a different decision-making and a different prioritization when it comes to our investment planning, and yields in a very dramatically different, potentially a very dramatically different investment plan over the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. And that allows us to be very, very agile in the context of a process that's very stable.
Because you need the consistency of result. And that's the one thing that, and especially being able to compare different scenarios and being able to examine all the different possibilities to ensure that you're taking almost the best risk-adjusted approach to delivering the outcomes that you need to for your end users and consumers of energy, the folks in the communities in the state. And so, yeah, that's always been consistent among every single customer we've worked with, where it's really driving towards the best risk-adjusted way of getting to the end result, but also along the way, trying to figure out where we can be flexible and allow for iterative adjustment. And I think the recent work we've done on the concept of the bundling for execution and trying to figure out how best to craft the most executable version of a plan, I think is a testament to that, because we're trying to factor in all these different ways that the pieces of work could be and should be adjusted, changed, or flex as needs arise and needs change, which they inevitably do, is sort of the second piece of that. But to your point, changing the weightings in the value framework, adding models, adjusting how they interact together, I think is the core of what we bring to the table and try to factor into that process.
Yeah, I mean, not that utilities want to change our decision making framework every single year. That probably is not great for any type of corporation, but it allows us to do so. Yeah. Right, it allows us to do so in a governed, structured manner.
Yeah, and I think it's also, but I think it's also about asking, well, what if? Yeah. And that's the big thing. I think we've been talking about the last probably 2 years. I think 2 years ago, Copperleaf came out with the what if sort of marketing campaign around scenarios, and it was really just to highlight the fact that even if you don't change anything, the fact that you've looked at all the different possibilities, that you've considered all the options, that you can sort of mathematically say, look, this is everything we've tried, and this is the path that we've chosen for X, Y, and Z reason, and be able to fundamentally justify that from an engineering perspective, from a strategic perspective, and from an operational feasibility standpoint, I think is also a way to look at integrated planning as a way to just be able to highlight all of that in one shot and show how traceable the decision making can be.
Oh my goodness, and that's so true, because that's one of the capabilities that Copperleaf provides us that our executive leadership team, including our CEO, is very, very excited for. What we've been missing is the ability for the CEOs and the executives of PG&E to figure out the implications of some of the decisions that they're making today to the future of the system and the future for our customers. We service a huge state, and with a lot of different microclimates and a lot of different townships, and there's a lot of different requests coming to our executives. San Jose may be coming to us for trying to help them develop a net zero downtown, whereas San Francisco may be asking for us to provide them with more reliable energy. There's all these commitments that are being asked for us to deliver, and our executives struggle with, if I make this commitment, what are the downstream implications? Mm-hmm. What work am I not able to do, or PG is not able to do, because we really prioritize and emphasize this type of work, right? And a Copperleaf, the scenario tools allows us to be able to constrain where we do the work and really run a scenario. We say, okay, we're going to meet these 5 objectives, and tell me what happens for the rest of the system when it comes to an evolution of wildfire risk or reliability risk or capacity risk or whatever outcomes that we want to measure. Yeah. And it's an extremely powerful tool. And that trade-off discussion is a discussion that's really enabled by some of the tool capabilities that we're seeing.
Yeah, and it's funny, like a lot of people, when they talk to us about the scenarios and they sort of say, well, isn't it just like a bit of a, not necessarily a black box, but they're like, well, does it tell me what to do? And I was like, no, it doesn't tell you what to do. It highlights what you could do and all the different options. But at the end of the day, the actual choice is based on what the business deems the best sort of middle ground or the best course of action. And that's going to involve some human judgment at the end of the day. But the tool can help you explore all the possibilities and highlight what the differences and the impacts of the trade-offs can be. And I think that's fundamentally what we're trying to get to, is this integrated view of both the short, medium, and long-term impacts of decisions as it relates to the needs that we have and the challenges the industry is facing, the opportunities the industry has in terms of rising demand for electricity, and be able to best capture those. Because there is a ticking clock on some of the opportunities in terms of the demand for electricity and the timelines to meet that demand. And so, clocks are ticking.
And on the ticking clock, Marc, that you mentioned, what happens if the clock runs out and utilities do not seize this moment or do not, invest in some sort of integrated planning at some level of their business? What's at risk if?
Yeah, so I think that, we started this podcast by talking about the once in a lifetime opportunity, right? To meet the increased demand that we currently are seeing. But we didn't talk about the implications of not doing so. And so for PG&E, we have many commercial and industrial customers that are coming to us and say, hey, can you guys deliver 2 megawatts, 5 megawatts, 10 megawatts of energy for us in the next 5 years, next 3 years? And they're not just coming to California. These companies, they're shopping around. Hey, where should I build my next warehouse? Where should I build my next headquarters? Where should I build my next data center? to all the states and to all of our utility peers. And they're going to pick the state and the location where they're going to be able to get what they need first and affordably. And because for the AI industry, as an example, it's a race for them as well. And the first people out the door, it's just like when we had social media platforms, the first people out the door are really going to have a competitive advantage. And so they're looking to pick the right location where the energy demand can be delivered first. And so if it's not in California, it's going to be somewhere else. And so if we fail to deliver for our customers here in California, they will go somewhere else. And I think that's going to be a tremendous opportunity lost, because every single one of those load opportunities does translate into more affordable rates for all of our customers combined, right? And we want to seize the opportunity. And so if we don't, someone else will.
So Wen, we've talked a lot about how this works in theory and how things ought to operate. Do you have any real world examples or stories that you want to share about your experience at PG&E?
Yes, I do. I think back to 2022, 2023, PG&E, electric engineering, electric operations, we got together and we did a system needs assessment across the entire grid, meaning we looked across all the different needs, whether it's, hey, we project that this town's going to grow by X percentage, therefore we need to serve this much capacity, to we see that the grid in this township has deteriorated and we believe that we need to rebuild it to be able to continue to provide reliable energy, to looking at this area of California is getting more and more dry and more windy, and we really need to build and rebuild a grid that's more resilient to wildfire in these locations. We looked at all the system need across the entire service territory and looked at what we need to do for the next 10 years in terms of investments. And we found that the amount of system need translated to $220 to $300 billion worth of work. Billions, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of work. And we compare that to our revenue projections. How much money are we going to be able to get with the customers' bills? How much money are we going to be able to raise by selling additional equity? How much are we going to be able to raise by partnering with other construction entities? And there's a huge gap. We're not going to be able to afford $300 billion or even $200 billion of system needs work in the next 10 years. Where integrated planning comes in is it allows us to be able to get 2 firsts and 3 firsts for every dollar that we spend. Meaning if we identify locations where we can rebuild the grid for reliability, but also at the same time address wildfire, that's how we get to doing all of that work for less money, right? And that's what the integrated planning process allows us to do, is to be able to identify those opportunities, to bundle the work, to be able to execute it more efficiently. Also at the same time, reducing the impacts for our customers. And when I say reducing the impacts for customers, I mean that right now, when we do work, we go out there and do it programmatically. And so on the same circuit for the same customer, we may go out there and replace a pole because the pole is deteriorated. But maybe 3 months down the road, another team might come to the same circuit and rebuild the entire circuit because there's additional capacity needs. Now, that means that there were 2 planned outages for that customer, right? But if we were able to bundle the work together and execute it all at once, we're able to reduce the customer impact by reducing the amount of planned outages. We piloted this in 2023, 2024, and we were able to get a 50% reduction in planned outages. That's a more reliable grid. That's a better customer experience, while also being able to address more of the system need with less dollars, making it more affordable for our customers as well. I mean, it's a win-win-win across the scope. And so that's why we're pursuing integrated planning. That's why we're deploying it, and that's why we're making it real next year for $5 billion per year worth of work. And we're really excited about the outcomes.
Yeah, you heard it here first. Win, win, win. Not every day that happens. So it's good insight and good, real world context to offer. So thank you, Wen. If you guys are ready, I think we can move to our lightning round. of the conversation. So the point here is super quick hits. Give me your hot takes. We'll try to keep our answers to like a sentence-ish if we can. I've got 3 questions for you, and I would love for each of you to answer them. So first up, what single piece of advice do you wish you could get through to all utility leaders? Marc, you want to kick us off with our lightning round?
Lightning round, one sentence. I would say that it's get involved with other utilities and push your vendors as well. I think the partnership aspect is huge. And I'll speak more from the vendor perspective, is that we need more and more folks in the industry to come push us on the solution front. And it's through partnerships like we have with PG&E where we get that firsthand. And so, yeah, one sentence, a bit long, but that's what I'd say. Yeah, push your vendors.
I love it. There are some commas in there. We'll count it as one sentence. Wen, what about you? What's your advice that you wish all utility leaders would hear?
Make sure that your operations can execute on the integrated plan. You want me to expand on that?
Perfect. You can if you want to.
What I mean by that is, if we're able to come up with the best plan in the world, the best integrated plan in the world, we don't save our customers a single dollar, and we don't reduce the impacts of our customers by any percentage unless we're actually be able to execute the plan in the field. And so the plan needs to be constructible, needs to be executed. And so we want to, in the entire integrated planning process, bring operations folks and bring the construction folks to the table with us so that they build a plan with us and we fully go into executing the plan, believing that it will work.
All right. I dig it. Next question. What do you think will be the dominant utility theme in 2026?
I only need one word for this: affordability. It's already the dominating conversation within the industry in 2025, and it'll go into 2026 and 2027. We need to make sure that energy stays affordable for all the citizens within the United States and the world.
All right. And Marc, what about you? What's your dominant theme for 2026?
I'll take a subcategory of affordability and I'll call out resilience. I think it's becoming more and more a big piece of it, because the resilience planning and resilience to the extreme weather events, that drives a huge amount of a category of the affordability, because you spend a lot of money recovering from storms and from the impact. And so to me, that's what I'll call out as one of the big themes as the events get more and more frequent as well.
All right. And then our last lightning round question: who is somebody, it could be a person, a leader, a regulator, a CEO, an innovator, a startup, you look up to in the energy industry, somebody you admire?
There's a lot of people that I admire in the industry. I think there's a lot of really, really talented, smart, and motivated folks that are trying to solve the energy issues that we have today and in the future. And one of those innovators, I think, is the CEO of PG&E, Patty Poppe. She brought into the PG&E culture lead with love, meaning that we have a love language in the way that we manage our employees and the way that we lead the company. And I think that's really groundbreaking. And she also brought in breakthrough thinking, challenging how we do things today and being tenacious about thinking about how to improve for the future. And those two things combined has really dramatically shifted the priorities and the what I believe are some of the outcomes that we're going to see in the next couple of years for the company. And I really admire her for that.
Awesome. That's wonderful.
No, I won't skip. It may sound a bit of a cop-out, but I think the customers that we've worked with for a long time are really the source of innovation for us, and the source of where I come away from interactions sort of impressed and motivated to try to do better in the work that we do day to day. Whether it's we just came off of an event in Ontario for a bunch of our clients there, and it's always those interactions that I come away from motivated to try to solve new problems, push further, and try to make a difference in the industry. And it's always the folks that are dealing with the challenges on a day-to-day basis in their day-to-day work that I think have the greatest impact on the work that I do, and have the greatest impact sort of on how I think about the industry. And so for me, it's going to places like the symposium and hearing firsthand from everyone in the industry, like what how they define their problems, and just getting exposure that way, I think is where I take away my inspiration.
So for anybody listening to this who wants to either understand a little bit more about integrated planning and what it means and how it works, are there any resources, events, get-togethers, things that people should keep in mind as they're kind of exploring what integrated planning means for them and potentially for their businesses?
Yeah, great question. I think there's two opportunities to get involved. If you're a utility that wants to speak with the other utilities in
more of an informal type session where they kick the vendors out of the room. We've done a couple benchmarking sessions by Royal because we were the vendor that got not necessarily booted, but just to
you guys weren't invited. If you're a utility that wants to get involved and have informal discussions and actually benchmarking around what your peer utilities are doing. We have started a industry consortium on integrated planning. You can reach out to me or to Marc, and we'll put you in touch with the right folks. And I believe that there's some details in the show notes around how to get folks involved there if they're interested. The second thing is we have also this year launched a integrated planning task force through IEEE, ITSLC. And so this leadership committee task force is tasked with defining integrated grid planning, and also starting the conversation to develop industry consensus white papers around what a integrated planning framework looks like, what are the optionalities for the utilities that want to deploy it, and then even in the future getting to specifics around frameworks for different value models. And so that's a more technical engagement, and we would love industry thought leaders and subject matter experts in this area to get involved there as well. And so the details there will also be in the show notes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. All right. Well, we have covered so much today. Marc, Wen, thank you so much for joining me to share, all of your ideas on the role of integrated planning in its many, countless definitions on this grid of the future and on the customer experience of the future. I have learned a ton. I have really appreciated all of your deep context and the, really helpful illustrative examples that you offered as well. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm really grateful for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Kinsey. Thanks for your time as well. It was really nice having a conversation with you. And Marc, as always, man, love it. Yeah.
Thanks, Kinsey. Appreciate it, Wen.
And I would like to thank our partners at IFS Copperleaf once again for making this episode happen. Here's a bit more about them. Every day, companies around the world are spending billions on the infrastructure we all rely on, the electricity that powers our communities, the water that keeps us healthy, and the transportation infrastructure that moves us. IFS Copperleaf's AI-powered asset investment planning solution helps critical infrastructure organizations deploy capital with confidence. By aligning every investment with strategic goals like decarbonization, risk mitigation, and regulatory outcomes, IFS Copperleaf delivers capital efficiency and business agility. You can learn more about IFS Copperleaf by checking out their information linked in this episode's show notes. Thank you once again to everybody for tuning in. I will see you back here for more next week on Energy Central's Power Perspectives.